Preparing for a pandemic is all about creating connections, working with partners in the community, how we prepare for that ahead of time so that those connections are already there. Otherwise, at a time of crisis, it's going to be difficult to establish connections that aren't already there. So if faith organizations are participating in that planning ahead as part of who they are as a faith community, connecting to healthcare organizations ahead of time and letting them know what planning is going on, that they want to be connected, they want to be part of a response to any emergency, including a pandemic influenza setting, then that's going to be incredibly helpful at the time.
If you go back, 50 or 60 years, then there were sporadic epidemics of things like typhoid fever and diphtheria. Diphtheria was especially severe perhaps 100 years ago. There were epidemics of diphtheria that wiped out whole families. There's one case here in Manitoba of a Friesen family that lost 7 children within 3 months. And there are other families that suffered the same sort of disasters. Then there was underlying tuberculosis or endemic TB, which means that it was always present. And then there was the pandemic of 1918, which is remembered with some of perhaps the most horror by Mennonites even now. There are stories about how sick people were at the time and how many people died within a very short period of time. Well, there's a very worrying bird flu epidemic going on among animals in Asia that has also come here to North America. If that virus passes over to humans, if it infects humans who have had close contact with the birds, such as chickens, they get very sick. There's a very high mortality rate for the bird flu. Fortunately, it has not spread in the human population as such yet. But it's feared that if there's a certain mutation that takes place, then perhaps we could have an epidemic similar to the 1918 flu pandemic. The bird flu, if it should jump to humans in a real way, would arrive very suddenly in a community. What happened in 1918, on the last day of October, everybody was fine, there were no deaths. By the end of the first week in November, there were already many deaths.
First and foremost, should care because Jesus, every time he sends people out, says, go and heal the sick. And we are called to be people who bring healing. And healing isn't just about providing medicine and providing beds. It's also about providing wholeness and a sense of hope and a sense of future in the midst of whatever is going on. All of the evidence tells us that a pandemic is coming. It's very much like the prophetic words of the Old Testament. This is coming, you need to be prepared. And you prepare, and part of that is prepare the way. And you prepare the way for the community to respond as a community of faith, as a community of compassion, as a community of healing and hope.
I'd say we need you. We need you to be available in times of need, to speak to Sunday school classes, adult Sunday school, children's Sunday school, to speak about your particular specialty in the context of a Sunday school, and what does that mean for faith and health.
Well, first of all, a lot of congregations already are broken into small groups, care groups or K groups, so they have different names that already care for each other at a deeper level than the congregation as a whole. So those are already groups that can at least have meaningful dialogue on a subject like this and figure out how to at least care for each other. I shared some information about what we're thinking of doing, or planning to do through this task force with my church's property committee and pastors, and they immediately started to plan with their custodian and their property committee and their suppliers of products around custodial work, putting up a number of stations, hand cleaning stations, to help in this regard, and as well as posters in appropriate places around hand washing and cough etiquette.
Do what you can to protect yourself and your family and your community. Stay home when you're sick. There's many ways of helping other people, and I think we're very fortunate in the Mennonite church community that most of our congregations probably have a lot of resources in place to deal with small crises, and in a pandemic, I think if we embellish or strengthen those, that is our message to the world, that we care for each other and everyone as best as we can, in not only a physical but spiritual and emotional way.
I think the important thing is that they work with government, because the government, the health department and so on, the emergency measures organizations are going to be in charge of a response to the flu. So the churches should know what the line of command is. Where do they go? Whom do they phone for help and advice? So first of all, just information of that sort. It's extremely important. Then I think they should also think about the extra burdens that will be placed on caregivers, pastors, doctors, nurses. These are going to be in the front lines of this pandemic. Then, of course, we should offer our church buildings and our facilities as hospitals or triage centers. We should use the caring network that already exists in all of our churches, people who look after each other in the case of emergencies and deaths. That network already exists, and we should really exploit that in a time of epidemic. And then I think we should also pay close attention to counseling those who are suffering deaths in the family, those who are suffering economic loss as a result of the disruption. The disruption of normal life could have an economic effect that could cause an awful lot of suffering in the community. Businesses going bankrupt, people losing their jobs, their income, and that could be the real danger for a pandemic, rather than wholesale deaths.
I wake up in the morning and I look out, look out, look out. I wake up in the morning and I look out at the new day you have made, and I say thank you, thank you, thank you, oh God.